everyone. This is the Contemporary World's weekly report, Crypto's news on global migration. Hi, I'm Shanine.
And I'm Jonah, and we're gonna start with a question. What is global migration?
Hi, I'm Sarah. First off, global migration is a permanent change of residence by an individual or group. It excludes such movements as nomadism, migrant labor, commuting, and tourism, all of which are transitory in nature. It is the crossing of the boundary of a political or administrative unit for a certain minimum period of time. It includes the movement refugees, displaced persons, and recruited people as well as economic migrants.
Hi, I'm Carlo. The great majority of border crossings do not imply migration. Most travelers are tourists or business visitors who have no intention of staying in the country for good. Migration tends to be regarded as problematic. It has to be controlled and curbed, for it may bring unpredictable changes.
Internal migration refers to a move from one area, a province, district, or municipality, to another within one country. International migration is a territorial relocation of people between nation-states. The crossing of frontiers, which separates one of the world's approximately 200 states from another. International migration arises in a world divided up into nation-states, in which remaining in the country of birth is still seen as norm, and moving to another country as a deviation.
Two forms of relocation can be excluded from broad definition. First, a territorial movement which does not lead to any change in ties of social membership and therefore remains largely inconsequential both for the individual and for the society at the points of origin and destination, such as tourism. Second, a relocation in which the individuals or the groups concerned are purely passive objects, rather than active agents of the movement, such as organized transfer of refugees from states of origins to a safe haven.
There are many categories of migrants, and these are known ones. Temporary labor migrants, also known as guest workers or overseas contract workers, who migrate for a limited period of time to work, and remittances to families in the country of origin. Highly skilled and business migrants, which are the people with qualifications such as managers, executives, professionals, technicians, and the like, who move within the internal labor markets of transnational corporations and international organizations, or who seek employment through international labor markets for scarce skills. Many countries welcome such migrants and have special skilled and business migrations programs to encourage them to come. Irregular migrants, that are also known as the undocumented or illegal migrants, people who entered a country usually in search of employment without the necessary documents and permits.
Refugees are those who are unable or unwilling to return to their country because of a well-founded fear of persecution on account of race, religion, nationality, and membership in a particular social group or political opinion. Asylum seekers are those who move across borders in search of protection. Forced migration in a border sense, this includes not only refugees and asylum seekers, but also people forced to move by environmental catastrophes or development projects like new factories, roads, or dams. This form of migration has similar characteristics to displacement.
Global migration can be understood as a cause and effect relationship. Though the causes are just as numerous as their effects, people move across international borders for a variety of reasons, including safety, natural disaster, political conflict, education, family, career, and economic betterment. Causes of migration are mostly in a disparity in levels of income, seeking employment, social well-being, and differences in demographic patterns with regard to fertility, mortality, and age structure, and labor force growth. According to neoclassical economic theory, the main cause of migration is individuals' efforts to maximize their income by moving from low-wage to high-wage economies. Migration decisions are made not just by individuals. They often represent family strategies to maximize income and survival chances.
Some of the reasons that trigger global migration can be explained by what's known as the push-pull factor. Pull factors are factors in the destination country that attract the individual or group to leave their home. These factors attract people to a new place largely because of the opportunities presented and the new location were not available to them previously. An example of a pull factor would include a family moving from a country with minimal job opportunities to a new location with more opportunities for a successful career. The beneficial element that the new country presents encourages people to migrate there in order to seek for a better life for their families.
A push factor refers to conditions which force people to leave their homes. A person would typically move because of distress, such as safety, natural disaster, or political conflict, although push factors don't require a person to leave their home. The conditions impacting the push factors often negatively impact the quality of life for the person if they choose to stay. Places that experience drought and famine, war conflicts, and unemployment would contribute to the push factors that trigger migration for the country's residents.
Continue with the topic, we're going to show a statistic of the distribution of OFWs by place of work on the 2016 survey of overseas Filipinos. Asian countries were the leading destination of OFWs, which is 85%. Middle East countries in the Asian continent continued to be the leading destination of OFWs. About 1 in every 23.8% OFWs work in Saudi Arabia during the period April to September 2016. The other preferred destinations were United Arab Emirates 15.9%, Kuwait 6.4%, and Qatar 6.2%. These statistics tells us the preferred countries of the OFWs to work, gain experience, or just a chance to migrate and become a permanent resident of there is also the availability of the jobs to Filipino applicants.
Most Filipino workers choose to work in Asia mainly because Asian countries are generally very comfortable, with diversity, and have been bearable coming to foreigners. Employers don't have as strict requirements. Even if you have work experience of less than a year, you will still find job that pays a reasonable salary. Asia has a wide range of opportunities for expats, not just in the corporate world. Filipinos are highly skilled in a variety of fields including finance and accounting, administration, and human resource management. In the medical field, hospitals are in desperate need of nurses and caregivers. IT professionals such as web or mobile app developers are in high demand. The hotel and restaurant industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry that never stops growing.
Migration boosts the working age population. Migrants arrive with skills and contribute to human capital development of receiving countries. Migrants also contribute to technological progress. Understanding these impacts is important if our societies are to usefully debate the role of migration.
The way migration affects development is not straightforward. Through various dimensions immigration, remittances, and return migration, migration has both positive and negative effects on key sectors of the Philippine economy. Similarly, sectoral policies have indirect impacts on migration and it's related to development outcomes. In the Philippines, the share of people planning to immigrate is higher amongst those who benefit from vocational training. When the training does not match the needs of the local labor market, beneficiaries tend to look for employment opportunities abroad. In contrast, when government employment agencies provide better information on domestic job opportunities, they improve the functioning of a country's labor markets, which tends to curb immigration.
Trends of global migration. Migration from the colonies to Western Europe since 1800s. Colonialism not only stimulated more than 60 million Europeans to migrate overseas, it also brought millions of Asians, Africans, and Amerindians to Europe. In the beginning, many of these immigrants came to Europe as slaves, but in the 20th century, immigrants from Africa and Asia served as soldiers and contract laborers in the European armies during the two world wars. In addition, the wave of decolonization after World War II stimulated millions of former European colonists as well as people of mixed descent and various colonial minority groups such as the Chinese to migrate to Europe in spite of the fact that the large majority of these migrants had never lived or visited there. In recent decades, migration from the previous colonial world has been dominated by now largely illegal labor migrants and asylum seekers.
For several centuries, Europe was a larger contributor to intercontinental migration than any other continent, whereas migrants from other continents rarely choose the old continent as a destination. From 1500 onwards, more than 65 million Europeans left their continent for other shores, 9/10 of them after 1800s. In comparison, migration from other continents to Europe was extremely limited. Until the First World War, only a very small number of Amerindians, Africans, and Asians came to Europe, which was mainly due to lack of money. Migrating to another continent was expensive, and the few Asians, Africans, or Amerindians that could afford it had no desires to move to Europe. Besides, they were held back by immigration restrictions, especially pertaining to migrants from the colonies.
For Europeans, money was less of a barrier. Although intercontinental migration on a mass scale did not occur before 1850, however, in the various European settlements overseas, migrants with sufficient funds to pay for the passage and to set up a farm or an enterprise in the colony had a good chance of improving their income and life expectancy, at least in the non-tropical colonies. In addition, some countries in Europe developed legal instruments, so-called contracts of indenture, which allowed citizens without savings to migrate to other continents. Some employees of the large European shipping and trading firms or companies operating outside Europe never returned home, but preferred to stay overseas once their contract had ended.
The volume of contemporary migration. The United Nations figures show that the global migrant stock grew from 75 million in 1995 to 120 million in 1990. The 1990 figure was roughly equal to 2% of the world's population. The number of migrants grew slightly faster than the world population as a whole, but the annual growth rate of 1.9% from the whole period increasing to 2.6% from 1985 to 1990 was not dramatic. International migrants remain a fairly small minority. And migration, conversely, is much larger. For instance, the number of international migrants in India in 1981 was some 200 million, more than the double the number of international migrants in the whole world at that time. The significance of migration as a major factor of societal changes lies in the fact that it is concentrated in certain countries and regions.
Today, people are moving more than ever before. There are presently around 258 million international migrants. That figure has grown rapidly since the turn of the millennium, when there were 173 million. Together with the increasing volume, we are seeing changing demographics, advancing technologies, evolving needs of labor markets, and continued challenges posed by wars, shortages, human rights violation, and climate change. We sometimes think of certain countries as source of migrants and others as recipients. But most nations today experience migration from all three perspectives as countries of origin, transit, and destination.
Our Large and persistent economic and demographic asymmetries between countries are likely to remain key drivers of international migration for the foreseeable future. Between 2015 and 2050, the top net receivers of international migrants, more than 100,000 annually, are projected to be the United States of America, Germany, Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, and the Russian Federation. The countries project to be not net senders of more than 100,000 migrants annually include India, Bangladesh, China, Pakistan, and Indonesia.
90% of migrants move for economic reasons, while 10% were refugees. The top three regions of origin are Latin America with 18%, followed by Eastern Europe and Central Asia with 16%, and the Middle East and North Africa with 14%. On a per-country basis, India, Mexico, and China are leading with the Philippines together with Afghanistan, only ranking 6 in the world. The top 10 country of destination are mainly in the West and the Middle East, with the USA topping the list. The majority of the migrants remain in the cities. The percentage of migrants in cities are 92% in the USA, 95% in the UK, and 99% in Australia. Once settled, they contribute enormously to raising the productivity of their host countries. The migrants' influx has led to debate in destination countries over the issue of whether migrants are assets or liabilities to national development.
The effects of global migration. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development recognizes that international migration can be a positive force for economic and social development, offering a mechanism to rebalance labor markets between areas of origin and destination, and thereby increase the global productivity of labor. Migration across international borders can also help to promote investment and higher standards of living in countries of origin through remittances seen by migrants to families and communities back home, and to accelerate the global diffusion of new ideas and technologies.
From a demographic perspective, migration is a much smaller component of population change than births and deaths in most countries and regions of the world. Migration is an important factor in the erosion of traditional boundaries between languages, cultures, ethnic groups, and nation states. Even those who do not migrate are affected by movements of people in or out of their communities, and by the resulting changes. Migration is not a single act of crossing a border, but rather a lifelong process that affects all aspects of the lives of those involved.
Migration can present a great variety of challenges ranging from this simple discomfort to profound shifts in mental health. Migrating to a new place where the diet or the local culture is largely unfamiliar may be quite jarring. Imagine moving from the US where drinking coffee or tea in the morning is the cultural norm to living in the Central Asia where in some parts drinking salty yak butter tea is the norm. Culture shock is predictable culprit for migratory challenges. Changes in the language, diet, politics, religion, and environment are immediately visible.
For example, those who migrate from Middle East or Africa are aware of the difficulties of adjusting to colder temperatures in Scandinavia. What might be as obvious though is the challenge of adjusting to extremely short daylight hours in the winter, making seasonal affective disorder of unanticipated hurdle for many immigrants. Furthermore, the act of leaving a home country can be emotionally difficult, especially for those who may never be able to return and or were forced out by situations that they couldn't control. Having to immigrate as a refugee from a war-torn Syria breaks up families and can destabilize immigrants' sense of self. This could lead to depression. These challenges obviously should not be taken lightly. Help and support are key.
Advantage for the country losing people is fewer people to be fed and housed. income sent home by guest workers, and reduced pressure on jobs and resources. While as a disadvantage are loss of young and able, loss of young men creates an unbalanced population structure, loss of working age people, loss of those most likely to have education and skills, division of the families and elderly population remains, so there's a higher death rate.
Advantage for the country gaining people is cheap labor helps overcome labor shortage. Immigrants are prepared to do unskilled jobs. Some immigrants are highly skilled and cultural diversity, while the disadvantage are language problems, racial or ethnic tensions, job loss to incoming workers, loss of those most likely to have education and skills, pressure on housing service as immigrants tends to be less healthy, placing strain on the health service, and they tend to live in low quality housing and limited skills or education in immigrant population.
Benefits and detriments for the sending countries. The remittances make significant contributions to the development of small and medium-term industries that help generate jobs. Remittances likewise change the economic and social standing of migrants. The purchasing power of a migrant's family doubles and makes it possible for children to start or continue their schooling. Asian Development Bank observes that in countries like the Philippines, remittances do not have a significant influence on other key items or consumption or investment such as spending on education and healthcare.
Remittances therefore may help in lifting households out of poverty, but not in rebalancing growth, especially in the long run. Global migration is cheapening qualified personnel and removing dynamic young workers. This process has often been referred to as brain drain. Governments are aware of this long-term handicap, but have no choice but to continue promoting migrants' work as part of state policy because of the remittances' impact on the GDP.
The problem of human trafficking. The USA Federal Bureau of Investigation lists human trafficking as the third largest criminal activity worldwide. 90% are exploited by private enterprises and entrepreneurs. 22% are sexually abused. 68% work under compulsion in agricultural, manufacturing, infrastructure, and domestic activity. Human trafficking has been very profitable, earning syndicates, smugglers, and corrupt state. Official profits as high as 150 billion USD a year in 2014.
Migration, they may contribute significantly to a host nation's GDP, but their access to housing, healthcare, and education is not easy. Differing regions may create cleavages between migrants and citizens of receiving countries, particularly on the West. Migrants are accused of bringing in the culture from their home countries and applying differences in linguistic and ethnic customs. Different forms of global interdependence will ensure that global migration will continue to be one of the major issues in the contemporary world.